Good day and welcome. This is Jordan Rich here on WBZ, and welcoming back to the program, Don Mueller, Ph.D., also known as Dr. Bones. He does science demonstrations for kids across the country and is trying to clear up some of the misconceptions about science, and we thought we'd do a little bit of that here tonight with Dr. Bones, a.k.a. Don Mueller, and talk a little bit about the different labels that science is attracting, good science as opposed to bad science as opposed to junk science. Welcome back, Dr. Bones. How are you?
Hey, how are you?
Fine, thank you very much. Glad to have you. Let's talk a little bit about this look at the various labels now, and these are important because there's so much information. People are being flooded with it, and you've sort of put this into perspective. So, if you don't mind, we can kind of go through some of these and what to look out for if you're a consumer. Okay?
Sure.
Okay. What is the definition then, in your estimation, as a scientist, of good science? What should we be looking for?
Well, good science is really reliable science. I mean, the public often equates science with absolute certainty, but it's really not the case, right? There are facts to be found, of course, but we have to fit them into place with what we know about the world. And that's really what good science does, as opposed to what we would call bad science. Now, bad science is not really bad so much as it's incorrect science. For example, remember when we learned about the planetary model of the atom in school?
Mm-hmm.
We thought the electrons were flying around in certain orbits around the atom. Well, it wasn't really true. Okay, we went to the quantum mechanical model, which is what we use today. So we would have said that that first model was incorrect science or bad science. So we build upon what we learn. So it's not that people were trying to fool anyone at the time. It's just that was the best that they knew at the time. And, of course, we've learned as we progressed.
Yeah, we knew, of course, in elementary school that there were, at the time, 9 planets. Now we're discovering orbs beyond Pluto.
Right, so science really is provisional. It's a temporary thing. We as we learn, we change the science as we go. But we really should be worried not so much about bad science as we should be worried about pseudoscience.
Yeah, that's our next look at definitions here. Yeah.
Right, and pathological science and what maybe even some people call junk science.
Well, let's start, Dr. Mueller, with pseudoscience, as you say, a collection of thoughts, experiments, etc., which often masquerade as science. Give us an example of a pseudoscientific event.
Well, astrology is a pseudoscience. I mean, palm reading is another pseudoscience. Things like dowsing, another thing called magic, M-A-G-I-C-K, right? So did I mention numerology as well? Things like that. There's no real way to actually measure a lot of the things in those particular sciences, and they don't have a good peer review process. You might as well call it fringe or alternative science as well, but they don't have the carefully controlled and interpreted experiments, which is really the hallmark of the scientific process.
In terms of the beyond natural, supernatural, or call it otherworldly stuff, I mean, there have been so many books written by people with Ph.D.s next to their names, studies of ESP, that kind of thing. How do we know we're getting the real deal, and how do we know we're getting just, as you say, pseudo-science?
Well, it really
what should we look for?
Comes down to, can they prove it? Can they show experiments that back this up, and can other groups do those experiments and also get the same results? There's the key. If you can do an experiment and others can do the same experiment and get these results, then you're on to something. But if you're saying, well, it only works in my lab, or it only works when I do this or that, then you have to be hesitant as a scientist and say, gee, if this is the case, then maybe I shouldn't be wasting my time worrying about what this guy's doing, and move on to something that I can reproduce, I can actually... Yes.
I'm talking here with Don Mueller, who's also known as Dr. Bones. He does shows for kids around the country, and we'll tell you how you can reach him on the web in just a second or two. But it seems as though the attention of media and the public is always focused on either the bizarre or the exceptional. I remember years and years ago, maybe 20 years ago, when the cold fusion parade came along, and then a few years ago that French lab somewhere that claimed to have cloned humans, all this kind of stuff. The media rushes to the scene, and then we find out a bit later that it's not the case at all. That's sort of just human nature, isn't it? We hear about something so fantastic we can't wait to jump on it.
Sure, but actually that's a good point you make. You said the media clamored to find out about this. Usually when science evolves, there's a peer review process, and these scientific observations are then published. So it's really not done via a press conference. When you hear that, excuse me, I'm sort of laughing there, but when you hear that your science is going to be given to the public via a press conference, then you gotta be hesitant about that, right? It really should go through a peer review process. Other scientists should test this and verify it. It should be published in a journal or several journals, and then you can launch your press conferences. A lot of times, what we call pathological science, which of course was the cold fusion example, it erupts because people are clamoring to find out about it, but they didn't do the background checks and the peer review process to find out if there were mistakes made. And sure enough, if mistakes are made, it makes people just look foolish. They may have been thinking they were doing something in terms of good science. Another example was the polywater fiasco. So cold fusion, polywater, there are a few of them. It's rare, but it occurs at times.
These can be well-intentioned scientific work, but done sloppily or without enough follow-up.
Right, it's sort of called science asleep at the wheel, you could call it.
Okay. We're continuing along here with a wonderful essay written by my friend Dr. Bones, a.k.a. Don Mueller, Ph.D., and junk science. John Stossel's done a lot of work on this as a consumer reporter on ABC. I've had him on the show. Junk science is, as you say, unclear in its intended meaning. So what is junk science? Give us an example or two, and then we'll talk about it.
Well, you could think of junk science, for example, as another description of bad science. But usually, at least nowadays, junk science is sort of a label given by different groups to discredit something they find that may actually be legitimate science, but if they're promoting a particular political agenda or environmental cause, they might try to attack the science that's supposedly being shown against them as junk science.
So you're saying that it really can work two ways, that it can be a label affixed to someone by an enemy, by someone who wants to discredit.
Well, think about it this way. Global warming, certain scientists say, well, we're heating up the atmosphere. Well, fossil fuel burning certainly will contribute to this and evolving carbon dioxide gas into the atmosphere. And if you wanted to attack a particular group, say you're involved with burning a lot of fossil fuels, you might want to attack their global warming models, and vice versa. Okay, so it really has kind of deteriorated into a ideological or political element-driven type of label, junk science. So it's really difficult to tell what they're really talking about until you actually find out what they're really talking about. And
that's why we want people to take this message from you today, which is to really read a bit more, investigate, see if there is, as you say, peer study review. Are there experiments to back up what they're claiming? Now, we also have
right. So don't worry so much about the label people use. Hear what they say, but then find out what exactly they're talking about. Sometimes they'll use these things interchangeably: junk science, pathological science, just plain non-science, right, or nonsense. So a pseudoscience. You have to really worry more about what they're talking about versus the label they've given it.
Now, in terms of the non-science, which sounds like nonsense, because it often is, you are one who really wants to warn the public about these celebrity-endorsed products, services, systems that are designed to change your life in an instant, whether it be weight loss or general fitness or taking this pill and your heart woes go away, whatever it might be. This is a problem, and is it going unchecked? It does pretty much go unchecked by the government, doesn't it?
It goes pretty much unchecked by the media and, unfortunately, by the government, especially if you're talking about vitamins and minerals and exercise products and things like that. But still, I'd advise your listeners to use the Dr. Bones look before you leap investment strategy, okay? Which just boils down to, does the product sound too good to be true? It probably is. We've heard that statement before. I mean, and quacks are really interested in one thing, and that is to place your money into their bank account. So you really have to think about these things before you open your wallet to a lot of these products, which, by the way, they're not all quack-related products, but you may be paying more than you need to for something that you probably don't need in the first place. And like you say, when people are telling you that you're going to turn your life around in a week or lose 14 pounds in 2 weeks, I mean, give me a break, okay? That's what I say. You are an advocate and a strong one for putting science where it belongs in public view, but with great study. You know, this kind of stuff has been going on probably since biblical days. The slick snake oil salesman who comes to town, and nothing really new here. Right. Well, but nowadays they do it with celebrities, right? These celebrities endorsing basically a lot of these quack-related products. My favorite line is, "I'm not a excuse me, I'm not a doctor, but I play one on TV," right? And that somehow lends automatic credibility to whatever they're promoting. And it's sad because some people really buy into this. They'll say, "Well, I know that doctor. He's on whatever General Hospital or something else," right? I remember. Do you remember Marcus Welby, M.D., and Robert Young used to? What he used to pitch? He used to pitch decaf coffee or some godforsaken product, but he looked like a doctor you could trust. He was that beautiful old kindly man, and who wouldn't buy anything from him? I mean, it's marketing 101. Hey, let me ask you, since you do travel to schools and do look who the most renowned doctor is nowadays. They say Dr. Andrew Weil. I don't even know if he's got a practice going. Well, so, Dr. Weil is certainly a very successful author and has a website and a lot of. I mean, he's a rebel on the other side of the fence too. He would give anybody a fight, but again, that's a celebrity. That's somebody who is seen on Larry King, and it's not your local first care practitioner. Let me ask you about kids and science, because during the State of the Union and throughout the last several months and years, we've been told that we need to pick it up and get with the program so that we can compete with other countries, other nationalities. How are we doing? What can we do better? I know it's a loaded question, but science is so critical. What need we do to improve our situation? Well, one thing, I sent my letter to the White House. I've been still for years trying to get the White House to convince President Bush to say nuclear versus nuclear. I've been trying myself as a linguist, yes. I appreciate that's one thing. Okay, that's one thing. But I try to bring some fun and excitement, but credibility to science, and meaning that science is actually a way to solve problems and not to be a problem in itself, all right? Where people can say, well, I've got something I want to learn here. Try the scientific method. Wishful thinking is probably not going to get it done. And that's a lot of what we do, especially with the political system. It's a lot of wishful thinking. Well, we're hoping that this is going to, and, well, we wish that this, and I say, no, forget about it. Let's just do it. Right? You said just a second ago, and this is so true, that science, if it's presented to kids in an exciting, artistic, creative, and fun way, they'll get excited about it. I mean, who wouldn't get excited about it? And I remember your predecessor, Dr. Wizard, Mr. Wizard, rather. Was it Mr. or Dr. Wizard? I believe it was Mr. Wizard. Mr. Wizard, yes. I used to watch Mr. Wizard and get turned on. Then I read my Tom Swift books and loved that. But it seems as though if we just introduce children at an early age to the wonder of science, they might get hooked and be more serious about it. Right, because science is not merely a collection of facts. Kids think that they've just got to remember one fact after another, and sometimes those facts we find out they're wrong in the end. Remember how I talked about bad science, right?
Yes.
The initial model of the atom, they called it the plum pudding model. Well, that was overturned by the planetary model, which was overturned by the Niels Bohr model, and now we have the quantum mechanical model. You see how science builds on its mistakes? Right, we find out, how things are done. So the fact is, trying to remember a lot of facts is not the important thing. The important thing is, how do things work? And can we try to build these facts into a way to figure out how things work? We had Newtonian mechanics, then we went to Einsteinian mechanics. We are going to have some kid, hopefully within my lifetime, who's going to figure out how to connect quantum mechanics and special relativity, or general relativity, right? So trying to figure out how gravity and the other forces come together in some grand unified theory. I would love to have some kid that I'm teaching today, and hopefully I can live long enough so that he can show me, hey, Dr. Bones, thanks for teaching me about gravity. Now I've discovered how they all come together. Somebody's got to do it.
That's a great, inspiring, and hopeful sign that, first of all, that you meet a lot of kids along the way around the country, but that can happen. And you said science is not about wishing, but that's a good wish, that we can all inspire our kids to do better. Hey, the website is drboneshow.com, and you're traveling pretty much everywhere, anywhere they'd have you, right?
Right. Next week I'll be talking about health quackery for senior citizens in Newcastle, New York. So we'll have a show there. Right. So my shows cover the whole gamut.
Well,
kids through seniors.
It's wonderful to have you back. Thanks for being in touch, and also for clearing up a few of these terms, and also giving us some insight into what a real scientist thinks these days. I really appreciate it.
Right, and get the dust off the baloney detection meter and go out there and view the world.
You bet. Dr. Bones, his real name is Don Mueller. He's a Ph.D. and a very wise and caring individual. When it comes to science, I would have enjoyed having Dr. Bones as a science teacher, I think, and he would certainly inspire you to get excited about it. We'll continue with more here on WBZ. This is The Jordan Rich Show.